welcome to another season of Not Your Average Joel, the podcast where we talk about a little bit of a lot, from the good to the bad and everything in between. My podcast is all about having fun, but it's also all about bringing awareness and addressing the elephants in the room that nobody wants to talk about. I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode. Not Your Average Joel starts right now. All right, I guess y'all ready?
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. I'm gonna give myself a countdown from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Not Your Average Joel. So, we have another amazing topic for y'all today, and I'm excited to talk about this topic. I feel like this is a topic that many people can relate to. But before we get into our topic for today, I want to welcome back both Brittany and DeAnna to the channel. It's always good having both of them on the channel. I know with Brittany, she's been on here a couple of times. We've talked about some good topics like singleness, and we've talked about like idolatry as well. And it's always good having her here, and just she just she just breathes life into and encouragement into our conversations, and I always love having her on here. So welcome back, Brittany, and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I always love having you here, and I also love having DeAnna here. It's always good talking with her about different topics. We've talked about like success, we've talked about entrepreneurship, we've talked about so many, even loneliness. We talked about that at one point a couple of years back. So it's always good having DeAnna here as well. So welcome back and thank you for being here.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me back.
Yes, absolutely. So, as y'all can tell in the subject title, and if you're listening to this, you know how to click on it to press play. You see that today's topic is about confrontation, and the reason why I wanted to talk about confrontation is because I know at some point in all of our lives, all of us have gone through confrontation. It doesn't even have to be with a person; it could be with a situation. It could be with even yourself. You have to confront yourself about things maybe you need to change about yourself, or even a situation that I'm actually going to bring up at the end of this podcast. So you just keep that in mind, people. But I do have a few questions I want to ask both DeAnna and Brittany. And of course, I'm going to put my input as well into this. But I just, begin to think that, we live in a world where everybody likes to give an opinion, and not everybody agrees on some of the same stuff, especially with this year. I know we're coming into like election year, we're coming into all the election stuff, and sometimes people like to voice their opinions, and sometimes a confrontation can happen just from a discussion about disagreement on politics. And it doesn't have to be just politics, but that's the first thing that came to mind just because we're in the year of election, and wondering who's going to be our president. Are we going to have the same president, a different president? So yeah, I think that this is a good conversation to have, and I'm definitely curious to hear other people's perspectives on this topic. So I think I'm ready to go ahead and get into this first question. So my first question is this. Like I said, at some point in our lives, we've all gone through confrontation with someone. So I guess my first question is this. What are some of the best ways to handle a confrontation without that confrontation getting worse, like to where you either say something that you regret, or even to the point where maybe it could get possibly physical or something like that?
Yeah. So it's really interesting too how you brought up all the different forms of confrontation, because when you think of confrontation, or when I think of confrontation, I think of somebody having a problem with me specifically, or like something very direct. But it can be other times very something that's more indirect, or something that's more of like idealism that you have in terms of it. So I always try and remain calm. It's easier said than done, especially when people are saying trigger words or like hurtful things or something in order to get a reaction from you. But my key is I try to understand their point that they're trying to relay or what they're trying to bring across. Like, what is their intention? A, what are they trying to bring up? And then also, what can I do to rectify whatever the situation is, or how can I help to be able to handle this? So, what can I change? What can I do? How can I add value? And then also, not to negate their point or anything, but also explaining my point of view and how I saw it. And if there is an apology owed, you know, being able to be that person and give that apology. But if there's not, explaining where I was coming from as well. I never bring up other topics or other points of confrontation. If there's another thing, like there's there's the people who throw everything in the pot at you, like they're bringing every single thing, like things are simmering over, so they have so many problems because they didn't confront them when they should have, that they're bringing 10 at you. No, we're speaking about one confrontation here. Speaking about one point that you're bringing to me. And I should be able to respect and only speak to that one point. I shouldn't be bringing up a comparison or a likewise problem because I should have confronted you in that moment if I had a different problem or a confrontation that I wanted to bring to you. So that's a little bit about how I go about it. If it needs to be done, sometimes I will on occasion set boundaries as well too. Like, for instance, maybe if it gets too much into a heated political discussion, let's agree to disagree. Let's not bring up this conversation again, or something surrounding that. Like, whatever helps with preserving whatever type of relationship you have, if that's your goal. And it doesn't have to be your goal necessarily as well in terms of it too. But that's another situation or another item to have in the back of your pocket. And then you have to stay firm on whatever boundary you're setting as well in terms of that too, in order for you to for it to come across properly, is what I will say.
Mm, yeah, that's
Yeah,
good.
I think what you shared was very healthy and really being considerate of other people's emotions when you're approaching them. I really appreciate how you mentioned those things and how it can affect the person. You know, for me personally, coming from a place of natural avoidance to confrontation, I'm just more recently being open to confrontation. For me, confrontation caused what used to cause a lot of fear. It used to cause like just the fear of abandonment, the fear of that if I say something, everything, they're just gonna hate me. Everything's gonna go awry if I just bring up this issue or this concern that's bothering me. So it made it hard to be vocal and speak up. It was easy to respond to other people's confrontations because I used to adapt and mold myself and try to do everything I could to just keep the peace. And if that resulted in denying my feelings or denying, just to the point where it didn't matter, it was fine for me. And I learned, a few years ago that just continuing to push myself and my feelings aside, it's not healthy long term. I'll give you an example. One of my friends was grieving, and it was really hard on me emotionally because I was kind of essentially their caretaker for a little bit because it was just a hard time. And sometimes when you're grieving, it's you don't need to be isolated for too long. And so we were kind of together 24/7 just during that time, and it was a wonderful time to be able to support my friend. However, I didn't realize how bad it affected me emotionally. And I was talking to a counselor, and she said, "Hey, well," and I'm like, "Well, I don't want to let her down." She's like, "Well, you're letting Brittany down," and I'm like, "What? How am I letting me down? Like, it's not about me, But sometimes, in order to be the best that I can be, I have to take care of my needs as well, and be willing to share and vocalize without the fear of rejection, and just trusting that I can tell the truth, right? And so when it comes to confrontation, for me, like initiating confrontation, it is usually time consuming for me to just get the guts to do it. But when I do approach it, I try to do it in a time where I'm assessing where they are emotionally and trying to be intentional with what they're going through um, during that time. I'm getting better at addressing it immediately, but that's not necessarily something I do. I typically take time to process what do I really feel about this before. I just don't like to just, I know some people, they want to just address it right away. Personally, I need time to process it. I'm still trying to understand my own emotions and how I feel about it. And, really discerning that because I didn't grow up super emotional or emotionally inclined because I don't know, I just didn't, I can't explain it, but I was not, I just, I'm not gonna say I didn't feel anything, but it just like, if it happened, it kind of just, I didn't really think much of it. I was like, it doesn't really matter, if it hurts, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. And so, but I'm learning that it is important to be intentional with how you feel. And so I say that to say that now I do prefer to take time when it comes to confrontation so that I can fully, state what I want to state in a clear way, in an honorable way, so that I'm not rude or offensive. But then also considering where they are, because they might not be in a place to address it, or they may need time to process as well, or they may have other things going on outside of me. And not every confrontation is about me. It could be a response to other things going on. But so you asked like three questions in one. So I would say like personally, that's how I would do it. And then if it were like about politics and stuff like that, I try to be respectful when it comes to harder topics and more difficult topics. I think if when we're in a conversation, if you approach it as a learning opportunity, it's so much easier to have an open discussion than going straight into, well, I'm right, you're right, all the things. So I think you really, DeAnna, you touched on a lot of good points. So I'll leave what you said there. But I just wanted to explain that, like, it's okay to kind of not be there and realize that there are some layers that may need healing in order to have to walk in the fullness of being able to confront in a healthy manner and in a way that's also honorable and respectful for those that you're speaking with. So,
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. I love that both of y'all gave some really good ways to go about a confrontation with somebody. I think one thing that I heard both of y'all mention that I'm kind of putting together is like the idea of basically like putting yourself in their position, like putting yourself in their shoes and like seeing where they're coming from, not only what is going on in their personal life that, maybe they're struggling with something, which is why maybe they're coming off maybe a little bit more emotional or a little bit more angry about something that's been bottling up within them. So I think, putting yourself in their shoes and then also listening to what they're saying and like, kind of maybe taking it in instead of, I think that's one thing that I've learned in the past that I have failed at before is like sometimes you're listening, but then sometimes like you're just ready for them to stop talking so you can input what you want to
Mm-hmm.
say because you're just ready to you're not really there ready to like learn or ready to hear what they're saying. You want to educate them like this is what I want to say and I'm right for this many reasons and I've failed too many times with that even in one situation for sure I could think of and that comes to mind where I had somebody uh was very angry with me about a situation that happened where I called this person a liar, and this person was not happy with that, and it kind of ended up with coming out. He was very mad with me. Like even his body language was like kind of getting angry, and me, my responses and my reactions was not helping. Thankfully it didn't get physical, but it was getting to the point where it could have gotten physical if my reaction would have been even worse than what I was already doing, which was not listening. I was, ready to, answer back and stuff like that. So I asked that question just because I'm sure there are many people out here that have been in a confrontation where they don't listen. And I know many people will say, well, of course, listening is like that should be the simple thing, but it's easier said than done. Sometimes you're gonna say, all right, I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna hear what they're gonna say, and then you're like, oh, hold on, I want to say something. Like I'm ready to either cut them off or just hurry up and are you done speaking? So it just turns into a even worse situation to where it's almost like a double whammy in a way because you're not listening to them. So there's almost like a what they're saying is going in one ear out the other, and then you're just adding on to their anger. So I feel like it just and that's the problem, like is not listening. So I think that definitely listening to the person and hearing them out and trying to understand where they're coming from. I heard that from Brittany, and I heard that from DeAnna as well. Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And then another thing, like something that Brittany brought up is, almost like a fear of confronting somebody and almost having more of an avoidance mindset when it comes to confrontation. I think that's something I struggle with as well because I feel like whenever I am confronting somebody, like I can already tell my body, like it goes insane. Like I feel like my voice gets shaky, and like my body, like I feel like I start like even though people can't tell it, but I almost feel like my hands are shaky and like I just feel like my whole body like reacts in like the worst way possible, like to where it's almost uncontrollable. So like I almost feel like watching your tone and like keeping your emotions in check are big too, because I feel like that's something that I'm sure I've fallen many times in, fallen into the trap of, oh my gosh, there's a confrontation. So then you almost go into this fight or flight moment. Not that I'm actually physically fighting, but almost fighting with my words. So it's almost like instead of flight, avoiding or like, let's step back from the situation or like DeAnna said, let's agree to disagree. It almost, sometimes I'm more in the fight and flight moments, and I'm definitely not proud of those moments. But bring this question up just because, I know people, I'm sure, struggle with this situation. So I think those are some big, like, key things that come to mind when I think of how to best handle a situation because I've done things that were not the best way of handling a situation.
Right. And being passive aggressive doesn't help either. You're saying it, but then you're like, no, it's fine. And then you're like having the attitude. Sometimes it's better to just discuss it and let it out. I've heard, so I have not personally experienced, but I've heard that when it is that heated, where it's almost like, okay, it's getting confrontational to, just kind of be like, hey, let's just take a moment, circle back to this conversation. But in the heat of the moment, that is really hard to do. I could probably imagine. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
hmm Yeah, it definitely can be hard for sure. So,
And I will say avoidance too. I feel like it's easy to fall into avoidance, but then you fall into the trap where everything just adds up and adds up. And then it could be the smallest little thing that happens where if it's like a regular day or some other person, you would think nothing of this thing. But then you have the trifecta or the X amount of things that previously happened that you didn't confront this person on, that you didn't speak up for yourself about. And then it all comes toppling out. Like you're like, I'm not standing up for myself. I'm not doing this. Why am I accepting this type of behavior? So the avoidance situation, while you think it may be helping because you think you're being the better person, you have to take a step back and you have to say, can I really let this thing go? Like for me, I have a 72-hour rule. So like no, I typically don't want to confront a person when I'm like heated and in the moment. Are there times I will? Maybe. But like if I do not bring up something that I didn't like a person doing within 72 hours, I lose that right to bring it up again. That was my chance to confront that person about a situation, about something I didn't like. I had my time to think it over to be able to bring it up with them. And then if I didn't, that's my fault. I can't bring that into something else. I can't relay that or carry that over. and giving yourself that timeline, that grace, it really makes you think about that person. It makes you think about that relationship. It makes you think about that situation. So that way you have that time, but also it gives yourself accountability because when they're coming to you with something else, you're not going to keep going back and looking back and trying to counter and argue. No, we're talking about this one confrontation here. Let's focus on this. Let's focus on how we can get through this confrontation.
Mhm.
And I think, yeah, like everything you just mentioned is really important because I kind of had to learn that the hard way because I was naturally avoidant, and learning to grow out of that behavior. And it just happened. It was something so small. And I really was like, it's not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal. It did not bother me that much. It's not that big of a deal. It's not that big of a deal. But, a couple of years passed and it still bothered me. And I ended up having to confront the person, and we're great friends. So it was not as painful as I thought it was going to be. I couldn't believe I dreaded it for that long. But, God has not given us the spirit of fear, and dread is fear. And so to be dreading something forever, to address it, that is just stealing the peace that I could have for today. And so I'm learning, like, okay, so I always kind of have to like call someone and be like, okay, I need to address this. I don't tell them everything, but I'm like, I got to speak up about this. Or like, I mean, it took me 3 months to ask for a raise at one of my jobs. The other one took forever, like a year. That's how hard it was to just make these conversations. And all I did was send an email. No, I did ask in person, but I sent an email first, and then I talked about it in person. But it took me a long time. Like I had to call my mom, brother, yeah, you can do it. You can do this. And I'm like,
Get that raise.
yeah, yeah,
Yes.
but we got to speak up for ourselves. We got to, but there's a healthy way in doing it too, because when we're, like I said, when we're communicating with people, we also want to be careful because how like we're nitpicking. Oh, I didn't like this. I didn't like that. I didn't like that. There's also a way to approach it too, and having a balance between that encouragement, but also like, hey, why don't we, when this happened, and they're always saying like use I statements, not you statements, and I feel, I this, I that, and that always really helps mitigate the things. But I just wanted to comment on that. Like, yes, when you hold it in, it gets worse. Like, small offenses lead to bitterness over time, and it can literally overtake the heart like nothing before. Sometimes it's better to just settle it immediately. Like I mentioned earlier, I do take time, but like she said, it's important to address it sooner than later. And I've just learned the hard way. Like that was such a terrible experience, like of me just not speaking up for something that I didn't even think that was that big of a deal, but it bothered me for like a year. I think it was 2 years or 3 years. It was a couple of years. And she's like, you waited this long to tell me. And I'm like, sorry for the touching, But it literally, like, it bothered me so bad that it was just terrible. And I was like, I don't want to experience that again, because I started to get so upset in my heart. And that's not what freedom looks like, And so we want to be free from bitterness. We want to be free from anger, and, holding every time we see the person, we don't want to be like, oh, we really did this, and just like literally storing up every offense that they've ever done. Like DeAnna said, like we want to be free to like let them be free too, to move on from their mistakes, and start over and just address that particular issue. Well, I don't want to say start over because that's a whole nother topic, but you know what I'm saying? Just like giving them the freedom to make a mistake, but also correct the behavior, So, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's good that you have to find that like right balance of, showing grace and then, being able to move forward without that bitterness too. Like if you are going to show grace, do it wholeheartedly. And, it's sometimes that could be hard in itself too when you act like, I've let it go, but then you start, like you said, sometimes you keep thinking about it and thinking about it. And I've definitely been in that situation before where I've said, oh, oh, okay, I'm good. I'm over it, or something like that. And almost like giving the indication that even though your words are saying I'm good, but like really deep down, we're not good. So like, I think that oh, something that DeAnna brought up about the whole like 72-hour thing. I think that's a really good like something that I should even practice more in my life because I feel like even like my next question that I had came to mind. We've kind of already briefly jumped into it about the whole idea of like avoiding or ignoring a situation. Like sometimes, it can be good to ignore a conversation, sometimes sweep it under the rug, but then sometimes it can get to the point where it may emotionally really affect you, and you may choose to ignore the wrong situation to where it's bottling up. And then, like Deanna says, sometimes whenever you bring up one confrontation, then sometimes you want to bring up another one. Here's another problem that I had that happened 2 years ago. Here's something that happened 7 months ago that I didn't like that you did, and then it turns into like, oh my gosh, do you even like me? Like, why are you bringing up all these problems about me? It's almost like I feel like I'm more of a burden to you than anything. So it just feels like I can see where, sometimes it can be good to like maybe you have to like pick and choose your battles, but I guess it just depends on how it is emotionally and mentally affecting you to where, if it's something that keeps on crossing your mind, especially if it's fresh on your mind, it probably is good to bring it up sooner rather than later, but I fall too short too many times with that where I let it carry on for a lot longer than it should.
And
So,
I think about it almost like my work day too, right? Like you can almost exactly what you were saying, Brittany, about dread coming from fear. Like I could put off a certain task or this, that, or the other thing of what I have to do for work. I could put off this confrontation all the X amount of time I want to. But at the end of the day, it's going to be still sitting in the back of my mind. It's going to still be there if I don't get to it by the end of the day for the next day. It's still going to be there on your radar and it's still going to be affecting you. And nine times out of 10, too, if you picked up on it, I would hope that the other person is also pretty self aware or is also pretty like into, has some type of intuition or knowledge that there's something going on, that you're acting different. So having that, I don't want to say urgency because you do want to think it over. You do want to be prepared with how you're going to vocalize this, what you're bringing to the table. You do want to be in more of a rational state of mind. But like making sure that you're not putting this off and you're prioritizing yourself and your mental health as well too.
mm, yeah, that's good. I definitely agree with all of that for sure. Yeah. I was just thinking about like a couple of situations that's happened to me actually very, very recently where there was a confrontation. Like, well, I had to confront two different people about a situation that happened months ago, and I think I'm seeing the outcome of it. And I think it's perfect timing how we talk about like how this topic came to mind for us to talk about today because this is something that's currently going on in my life. Like there's a situation. I've been on many trips, and there was one trip that I went on with a few friends, and we were supposed to split with this Airbnb that we were staying at. I ended up paying for the whole thing. They were going to pay me back. Well, a couple of them didn't pay me back, and this was sometime last year. So here we are, fast forward to now. It's still going on in my head that that these people said they were going to pay me and haven't paid me. So now I'm kind of in that awkward position of, do I confront them about it? Do I tell them, hey, you forgot to pay me? Or do I let it slide? But in knowing that there was a lot of money that went into that play Airbnb where we stayed at. So a couple of days ago, I did end up reaching out to them. And I feel like I don't know. I feel like one of them did pay me back, and I told them thank you, and they didn't send no response back. But I'm not sure if I'm taking it as, and I could be taking it wrong. I'm afraid that I probably made them mad. That like, why are you asking about it now? Or I don't know. I could be thinking of the whole situation wrong, but I feel like this other person hasn't responded at all. So I'm not sure if these people, they said they were going to pay. It's been a few months, or it's getting as time months are gone by, and they still haven't paid me. So my only thing I could think of is, as awkward as it is, just to let them know, hey, I'm not sure if you remembered, but like you haven't paid me for this trip yet. So, I did kind of send a text message, and, I try to make sure that my delivery, even though sometimes a text message, the delivery can come off wrong. And I was trying to be as smart as possible with like the words that I wrote on there, because sometimes I could send something and think that I'm coming with good intentions, but then they may read into things like, oh my gosh, like he sounds mad or he sounds bothered about it. So, yeah, I'm currently in a situation with confrontation that I'm not sure on the outcome of the situation yet, but I'm hoping that maybe they are, willing to do what they said they were going to do. But I've been holding back for quite some time on like telling them about it, and I guess it's better late than never. But still, I guess I'm just kind of feeling a little uneasy about the situation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a difficult one, right? Especially when you bring up difficult. I mean, that's what confrontation surrounds, right? It surrounds money, politics, it surrounds family, it surrounds emotions, like everything that could really hurt people in terms of it. It's coming from that point. It all boils back to understanding, setting clear boundaries. So like now, for instance, from now, monetary wise, you have to set boundaries for yourselves, for people you're traveling with. Like, I expect money on X date. If you need to make a payment plan with me, start making a payment plan. Let's get you consistent. This is what I need from you. If you can't do this anymore, I completely understand if you have to back out, or like vice versa. If you're coming off of a situation like that, you could also tell the person, you could be like, hey, I absolutely love traveling with you. I love this friendship, but like, you still owe me from this past trip. So I really can't travel with you anymore. Or next time we're booking an accommodation, I'm going to need you to put your credit card down, or whatever it is, the finances down in terms of it, because I don't think it was fair to me. We had an agreement, like just stating the facts of it and being as honest as possible too. And you can even be like, I think adding in um, some vulnerability to the mix too helps and goes a long way. Like, I, I mean to confront you at this point, just to confront you. Like, I'm going through, a difficult time here, there, or the other where, and this could really help me out here. Like even bringing that into it and showing the compassion of that. You know, so there's not a right or wrong way, unless you have ill intentions as a person. That's the wrong way, is when you go into it looking for an argument or looking for a battle or looking for a fight. But at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes. We're going to say the wrong words at times, but it's just what your intention is behind the confrontation, behind the conversation, and then you being adaptable to make sure that you're saving that relationship or whatever is going on.
Hmm. Yeah, that's really good. I think boundaries, you mentioned that word, is like key. That's kind of like my next step right now, is like almost setting boundaries and like taking this moment as like a learning experience. So like if I want to keep my friendship with these people, I have to be a little bit more like, I know before we started this recording, we were talking about like, am I the type of person that says yes, more than no to situations? And in this situation, I was more of a yes man kind of thing, like I'm saying yes, like, oh yeah, I got this, for now, but like I will need the money at some point. And then, but I don't want to come off like I'm being, maybe what's the word, like accusatory, like that I'm accusing them of like going on a free trip and like using me or taking advantage of me, because I wouldn't want to think ill or like think bad of people that I consider my friends. But then sometimes, you start having these doubts in your head and, stuff like that. And to where, I guess that's kind of where I got to the point of, it's been months and I feel like it's a reasonable amount of time, to, come out and like mention it because, maybe I don't know if they forgot. I don't know if it was just, is there good intentions on their part or not? I don't want to question that, but more of just, I guess I just want to reach out and just see, where's their head at and, what can we do different going forward. So I think definitely, I think like with friendships, I think like accountability is important. And I know sometimes holding someone accountable can be hard because, even with myself, sometimes when somebody tells me something that maybe I'm doing wrong, you don't like hearing it initially. You're like you don't know what you're talking about, or or something like that, and you start kind of denying it, and you start thinking that you know more than them, and then sometimes you ends up turned out they were right. So I feel like I'm trying, with this situation to like kind of be that, trying to throw some accountability into the situation that, hey, you said you're a man of your word, and this is still out there, and every time we have a conversation, this is never brought up. So like, I want to make sure this is still in your head, like is it still in your mind to still pay me back. So but I don't want to come off like I'm being greedy either, but I don't want to be a pushover. So it's like I kind of fall in this like seesaw where I'm like, oh, like what do I do? So it can be hard with confrontation, especially with people that you're really close to. I think confrontation with strangers is already hard enough, but I feel like with people that you're really close to, it like hits harder, and it's like, the home is where the heart is what, I've heard that quote many times. So it's like when you're confronting someone that you're really close to, a friend or a family member, it hits different. And that's where that fear and that avoidance, that Brittany mentioned, comes in my life for sure. So,
Yeah. Um, when you shared that story, it made me think well, it's surprising, but at the same time, I've been there before because I'm like, oh, I don't want to like bother them, or like if they said they're going to do it, then they're going to contact me. They're going to speak up. But, one thing that kind of makes it easier with clear expectations is, um, one, if they're going to commit to loan to pay back, then they need to do that. If they just want to borrow, then they need to request. Like if they want to borrow, then that they're intending to pay it back. But if they would just like to have it, then they need to ask just to have it. That makes sense.
mm,
Um, and also when it comes to loaning something that if for some reason they don't pay it back, you're okay, you know. But having a deadline, just saying, hey, you said that you were going to be able to pay me back. Um, why not just maybe a month from now, like at the end of the trip, say, hey, I get it. Times are hard. I'm so glad that I can be able to like work with you on this trip. I'm not pressuring you for anything. However, I would prefer that I get it by this date, because we're not, rich, or, well, I don't know, we're not rich yet, but I'm just saying that like when it comes to different situations like this, it's like people treat us how we allow them to treat us. So like for they may be like, oh well, Brittany doesn't care. Brittany never cares. Like she's always fine. It's always fine. Like she's not gonna worry. Like it'll be fine. And they may not be used to this point. Maybe in the past you've done it and it wasn't a big deal, but maybe this time it was like, actually I actually was expecting you to keep your word this time. So just being honest with that person and having that conversation it really does help, just making that clarification. Hey, if you're going to loan money, then my expectation is for you to pay back. I'm super honored to do that. I'm willing to help you out, but that is something. Now, if you're just asking to have it, that's something different, even though I wouldn't offer someone to have that much, but I'm just saying, like, if it was like $20, that would be a better conversation for that. But um, I hope that kind of gives a little bit of clarity, but there has to be a level of respect. And, I would just, yeah, like, I think it's great how you're taking the high road. I mean, not the high road, but just, giving them the benefit of the doubt. However, there is a level of accountability because they did state that. And if they really meant it, they would at least make efforts to rectify the issue or at least address it. So I think it's good that you're bringing it back up because they may have been trying to pay it back this whole time. They just never vocalized that to you, or I hope that they didn't forget. I think this is a kind of sensitive topic, so I don't want to talk too much about it in depth, but I say all that to say deadline, I think, would be a great, easy way. Even now, like, oh, why are you contacting me now? It was months ago. Well, it was months ago. Why haven't you contacted me? Like, anyway, don't say that, but I'm just saying that's like, it can be either way, but saying, earlier I wanted to contact you. However, I just was a little nervous. I was expecting to get it. How about this? Let's make an agreement. If you can pay by the, make the payment plans or different things, whatever, I'm willing to work with you, so. And sometimes it tells you, like, I think one of the things, the best advice that my dad ever gave me, and I know you're not asking for all the advice, but my dad said, I had a financial situation with someone that I know, and he said, is your friendship worth more than this financial disagreement? Or is the money worth more? And it really put things in perspective to me because he shared a personal story, and eventually the money won out, but he lost a really good friend. And so he just really had me think about it in that situation, because at that time that person did owe me something, a great amount, and it kind of left me in a negative, not a negative account, but like I was like under a contract and I couldn't get out of it. So I was like, dang it, like, and my dad was like, what are you going to do? Like, which is more important to you? And I was like, you know what? This friendship is actually more important to me. And financially, I was able to cover the costs and I was able to forgive and just let it work out, And it wasn't, I learned the lesson, probably not to do that again, but it was not that large of a lump sum that I was, I was willing to risk my friendship for that, especially because I knew where they were financially and different things like that. So.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up because that's almost like the other side of the situation where sometimes you will, put things into perspective like that. Like, will this cost a friendship, over money that, I already paid for, it's already something that was done in the past. So, even looking at it from that angle, I think is important too, because, there are some situations where you can, I'll just brush it off, we're good. Like if it's a one-time situation, I can brush it off and we're good. So, I think that's important that you even bring that story up too, because, you can look at this from two different perspectives. And, I guess depending on if it's a habit that this person keeps doing or if it is a one-time thing, there is that we brought up the word grace, like a good bit. Like there's that time where, maybe you do offer grace. Maybe you didn't realize that they may be going through a financial struggle, or, maybe like you said, they were gonna pay eventually. They just forgot to mention that, oh yeah, I'm still gonna pay you. So, you just never know. And that kind of even goes back to our first question, of like putting yourself in their shoes and like, seeing where they're coming from and all of that. So I think that's all really key for sure.
Yeah. And being able to keep your word is a level of maturity.
Mhm.
And when I was younger, I would just like, oh yeah, 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 I'll do, well, no, I didn't, not regarding money, but I'm like, I would overcommit, and not realize the value of my yes, and not really just saying yes, 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 and not recognizing, And so some people I've noticed, some like, oh yeah, I'll pay. They're not even really thinking about it. I'm not trying to say that against the person, but being able to keep your word, that is something that's important, or at least having the maturity to address it. That's important as well. And so don't want to glaze over that, but because at that time I did give grace, but I was also a lot younger. And so I didn't even know how to address it and be like, hey, next time. But I did want to
Yeah.
mention that the you can't just say that you'll pay someone back lightly when it's such a large amount too. So that maturity is something important to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I definitely agree with all of that. Like, there's got to be some sense of, maturity, and sometimes you have to take well, you always try your best to take the higher road, but sometimes it's hard to take that high road. And, I think that, that's why I like talking about a conversation like with confrontation, because it does put you into like different, like you start thinking of a bunch of different circumstances where confrontation can happen, and then sometimes you're the one being confronted, and that can be hard. Like, I know one time I remember I had a friend confront me, and I kind of brought up this whole thing about, like, they tell you something that you don't like, and then you think that you know it all and stuff like that. But I had a friend one time tell me that I was being verbally abusive. And I was thinking in my head, like, verbally abusive? Me? Verbally abusive? I almost sound like that on TikTok, me? Am I the drama? I was thinking about, like, me being verbally abusive, like that doesn't sound like me. Like, I try to watch my words, but then when I started like thinking about conversations that me and this friend had at the time, I could see where he was coming from. So sometimes there's a lot of self-reflection, and like I said, maturity comes with that as well. So, sometimes it's hard to be the one being confronted as well. I think just confrontation in general is just really a tough thing to deal with when it comes to people. But I really like that we are talking about this, because it just going into like our future, whether it's, later in the year, whether it's stuff with election, whether it's, another situation that may happen, a friend or family member that, may confront you about something, or you feel like you're bottling something up. We can take this as a learning lesson of like how to better handle ourselves and to really hear people out. So I love that we're talking about this.
Yeah,
So,
Too.
yeah. I'm still learning. So as I speak, audience, I'm learning and I'm growing. And every day I'm just trying to be a better communicator, um, and more clear and more effective. So
We
mhm,
all are. Like I said before, that's what makes us human. And that's exactly the perspective I try to come across as well too, when I'm realizing, when I'm listening to a person, and I'm realizing, hey, I might have been in the wrong here. And that's what I wholeheartedly will apologize if I am in the wrong in a certain situation. And even if I don't think I'm necessarily in the wrong, if I did hurt somebody's feelings, I do take that into account and into consideration. And don't be afraid to ask things like, how would you have handled the situation? I'm so sorry about that. How would you have handled it? And then even hearing their perspective helps you mold and adapt yourself, and you personally grow to it as well, which is super helpful. And then people are seeing you're making an effort too. You're actually listening to what they're saying, and they're going to be more like receptible to whatever they're bringing to you. For me, I'm very happy with the people I surround myself with, because I'm not afraid to bring things to them. And I wholeheartedly hope they're not afraid to bring things to me, because I am a very, very direct person, and I bring things up normally. A lot of the times I try and confront it early on. So that way, you know, everybody knows what position I am in. And hopefully I know what position they're in terms of it too. But I did want to touch base again on something you said, Brittany, and that was your word. Like your word is so important. And when you're younger, you don't realize that. You know, I related to back to like when we're kids and our parents would tell us just things to motivate us to do whatever they would want us to do. Like, oh, we'll go to the park if you do this, that, or the other thing. We'll do this. And it's like, it's become this accepted thing in society where you can just say things or make promises and not follow through on that. But like, that is your reputation. You're going to be the person who doesn't follow through on what they say. Oh, I'm going to call you back. And you never call the person back. You're not a reliable person. And that's not to be mean, you know, and that's okay. I have a lot of people, especially being traveling constantly. I have a lot of friends who are like, I want to travel here, I want to travel there. And then for some reason or another, you can't make it. Totally understand. But like when you're to the point where you're committing to something, like for instance, Joel, the situation you brought up, you're committing to, I am going to pay this, I am going to go on this trip, you can book my spot. Like you should be able to follow up and should be able to proceed with whatever you're promising or whatever you're saying. And like I said before, if you're setting those boundaries and those intentions early on, I've had very much so much success with it. And it's funny enough that as you were bringing up that story, one of my friends was asking me for my Cash App on how they could pay me back for a reservation for upcoming travel. So it's like just being intentional and then also understanding as well too. Like if a person can't afford to pay something, like I have no problem. Like, fortunately, I'm in a situation where I can help us with making this reservation, but I am going to need it by X, Y, and Z date, or I'm going to need you to set up a payment plan in order for us to do it. Because I want you to experience this wonderful thing. I want us to be able to hang out together or do this, that, or the other thing. Uh, but also, I'm only one person with one income. So,
Yeah, we got to be
yeah.
considerate.
Yeah.
Definitely. And even as you were talking, it made me think about, you know, that's why I think it's good. It's interesting that that in this particular circumstances, it has not been brought up. That's an interesting fact. However, with the benefit of the doubt, we can give, when you confront, according to my counselor, when you do confront something, you give them an opportunity to make it right, and you give them an opportunity to correct the behavior. And because if we never address it, then we'll really never, they may never even know that it bothered you. You know, they might have been like, oh, they're fine. You know, maybe, I don't know if you've done that in the past, but I'm just saying, if you have, if that's a pattern that you've done in the past, then some people are just going to be like, oh, it's fine. You know, they're not going to really think much of it, like she said. But when you kind of say, hey, you know, then they're like, oh, they're more aware, like, oh, I shouldn't just say stuff just to say things. You know, I need to be more intentional with what I'm saying. And we get the opportunity to confront and give them an opportunity to actually correct behavior, because especially for things that people have no idea about, like when I avoided someone for like 6 months and my counselor was like, what? And I was like, yeah, I did, because I didn't want to bring it up. And she was like, that's not, you didn't even give him an opportunity to make it right. And I'm like, oh. And so I say that to say that, like, if it did happen, I love the proactiveness and just doing it on the front end. It really does make things so much easier, because when it comes to trips and everything, like that is, you know, already a thing. Like, you know, just having those clear statements, it just makes everything so much easier. You know, there's no unknown, there's no ambiguity. But, you know, if it did happen after the fact like this, you know, just being, maybe that will motivate you to like address it sooner. It kind of helped me. I thought about it. I never actually did. It didn't need to be addressed by the time like I finally got the guts to address it. But I'm just saying that it was good advice. Have I taken it yet? Halfway. Like I had the conversation in my head. I wrote it down. We didn't really need to have it by the time I saw the person again. But I hope this is
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that you bring that up because, I think it is important. Like I love doing like some of these topics because it can be a learning experience, like things that you can take from, like we mentioned earlier, like bottling things in, holding it in for a while and like, you know, like almost yeah, just keeping it all in, not really just start thinking about it and just being bothered about it all. And then by the time it comes out, sometimes it can come out wrong, so there's that. I think when you come in it with the right attitude, like Brittany said, it's almost like you're extending the opportunity for them to make things right and to show that you giving them the benefit of the doubt was beneficial on your part long term because you believed in them that they are going to do what they say they're going to do because to me I feel like we've been talking about your word like I feel like it should have high value and high priority like in as far as like commitment and you being the person that you say you are and like keeping a promise basically kind of situation. So I think that we're all about growing and evolving and just I know people always say like once you get to a certain age that like you are who you are, but I almost disagree with that in a way because I feel like there's always room to grow even when you are an adult. Like I feel like some people think, oh, you are like your things are rooted into you from childhood and then it just stays with you as you get older. But I feel like you can break certain barriers. There may be some things that may be harder to get rid of than others, but I feel like overall, I feel like things like this, I'm taking as a learning experience with confrontation because the same patterns that I have done in the past, I don't want to do again because sometimes it can lead you into different situations. It could make the situation worse, whether you lose that friend or whether even if you regain that friendship, that the words that you said still is going to sting. Like they're still going to think about it and even though like with the verbal abusive comment like me and this person is good nowadays but this person told me this over 10 years ago and I still think about it because just picture myself of that as that kind of person it's hurtful to myself so I think that even words like that it was in a way helpful that it was brought up only because it made me self-reflect and realize, okay, I need to watch like certain words, like not and watch my tone and stuff like that. So even though those confrontations can be hard to handle long term, I think they come out better. But then sometimes there are those wounds that stay in place. But sometimes you just have to let that wound completely heal and sometimes some take longer than others but I think that I love talking about this because it's all about growth and it's all about bitterness like Brittany brought up the idea of bitterness and letting yourself be free from the bitterness and like having peace in your life and freeing that person as well so man I didn't realize how good this conversation was going to be. I love that we were talking about this, and I still have one more questions, but I'm enjoying this so far. So,
Me too.
um,
It ties into everything. You don't realize how much confrontation ties into majority of aspects of your life and
Yeah.
communication and social skills and all of that jazz.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think like with my final question is not going to take as long to talk about because it's not really in relation to people. It's more just in relation to situations that maybe you have a fear of something that like you were afraid to confront. And I have a couple that come to mind. I could bring up maybe a couple situations, maybe while y'all are thinking of yours. So, for me, one thing, I think I even brought this up to DeAnna last time we spoke, was the idea of flying was like scary to me. Like, I was so scared to fly, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be that person to fly. And, I'm going to always just take the road trips to places. But then, I had this opportunity 5 years ago, well, almost 6 years ago, to go to Europe, to Greece. And for my school, I was representing my school and I was thinking, you know what, Joel? do it. Like you're in college, well, I could always go back to college if I wanted to, but at that time, I knew that I only wanted to go to college, to get my bachelor's. And I was like, this is your this is your senior year. So it's like you only have one more semester after this. Just go with it. And it was right around my 25th birthday too. So that was another cool concept. So I went ahead and confronted this fear of flying. And even though that whole anticipation of flying was scaring me, like, and you start hearing the engines revving up, and then like how it feels like, well, of course they got to do all their safety stuff, all the pilots and all of that, and you got to wait your turn to go up, and sometimes it feels like eternity before you go up, and especially that first time when they're like, when you hear that, all right, your takeoff's gonna happen around let's just say 11 o'clock, and it's like 11:30 and you still haven't flown out, then you're like, oh my gosh, let's just get up in the sky, let's get this over with. And finally that happened for me on that first flight. And now ever since that first flight, I actually, not that I say I love to fly, because I still get a little nervous with like turbulence and stuff like that, but I have more of a love for flying. So I feel like that's like a situation that I feel like I had to confront, because it's like I'm holding myself back from situations and maybe meeting people like DeAnna, for example, like getting to meet different people from all over the country and all over the world too. And, I'm holding myself back from like experiencing all of these things that I could be experiencing while I'm single, while I'm young, and, while I'm, don't really have a wife, I don't have kids. So, I just think that flying was my biggest thing for sure. Does any situations for y'all come to mind? Like maybe any concept of anything, whether it could be heights, it could be like maybe you were scared of heights and you went skydiving. Or maybe
The
not
example
about
I had,
Okay.
skydiving.
I mean, the example I had is actually not similar to yours, but similar to the fact that it was a study abroad trip as well, or an abroad trip. Um, about just taking a chance and like seizing an opportunity when it came, and not really worrying about how you'll get there, just kind of taking a chance and like figuring it out as you go. But I'll think of another example because it's pretty similar to yours, except it's not about flying. It was just about like I've always wanted to study in Spain. It was always like a dream of mine. I studied Spanish in high school. My professor would always talk about it, and it was just something that I wanted to do. And I did not get to do it until senior year of college. And I was like, okay, you're about to graduate. You either need to do this now, or you're never going to be able to do it ever again. Like I had to kind of like tell myself. And one of the people at my church was like, if it's fear, it's not a good enough excuse. You got to do it. And so I ended up doing it, and I was able to graduate like after I finished studying abroad. So it was perfect. But I need to think of a better confrontation, because that's what I had.
You're
I
good.
think I love that example though, Brittany. I really did. I think confrontation ties a lot into unknown, like you putting, well, I should say confrontation, fear, and unknown. Like they're all equal parts balanced. Like we fear the unknown, and then we also fear confronting the unknown. So, like putting ourselves in these different positions and these unique things that we've never experienced before. It's so scary. You learn so many different things about yourself by putting yourself in different unknown and unique places. Like it's just having the confidence in yourself and learning more about yourself. For me specifically, when I think about like a situation I confronted and like tying it into the unknown, I would say my career. So when I was going through university, I put myself through university by working multiple jobs, and one of them was at a bank. And my career path could have been laid out right by staying at that bank. Like I was easily working my way up along the ranks. I was working towards becoming an assistant manager. Like I was already at the time weekend supervisor. And then I took a step back and I was like, Well, the whole point is you're going to university and you're going to university for a specific subject and you're not passionate about what you're doing. Like, yes, this is making you a pretty good income for the time for you to be able to support yourself and what your endeavor is. And it was the scariness of having to apply for all different types of jobs, wondering if I'm actually going to like this job. At this point, I was applying for internships and externships since I was still in university. And then it was taking the leap of, is this internship, is this experience actually going to land me a full time job in the career I want? Or is it me actually losing a good job that I'm already building my place in because they're obviously not going to let me leave and work for a whole summer somewhere else? So I will say, confronting that, weighing my options, seeing what was the best choice for me, ultimately ended up being the most ideal. It got me into my career trajectory and I made it far in terms of being involved in the bodily injury industry, which I absolutely enjoy. I learned so much about negotiation, communicating with people, and being able to handle different situations, which I absolutely love. And I could honestly say if I didn't take that leap, if I stayed in my comfort zone, if I didn't confront the difficult situation and like pushed myself out of it, I can candidly say I wouldn't be where I am today.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that you bring that up. That like I think of, one choice that you make can like make a whole bunch of chain reaction of like good choices upon that. And that sounds like with your situation, like, wondering, which route should I take as far as like a job, like a position that you want to take. And then it seemed like you chose the right choice, it sounds like, because at the end of it all, like you came out of it with, it sounds like, a lot more positivity, more good things happening, and learning a lot of new things too out of it as well. So I think that's amazing. I think like confronting those situations can help build you in many ways.
Yeah, that was a really good example.
Definitely.
That's a good example. Um, yeah.
Yeah.
So when I graduated school, I told myself when I graduated from college, I told myself I'm never going back to school. Never going back. I'm like, I am done. I'm not going back unless it's paid for. And I work in higher ed, and actually, they do pay for your tuition, depending on what type of work you do, like the type of commitment, if you're full time or part time. And so I had the opportunity to go back to school. So I was like, oh man, I need to go back to school. And I was praying about it. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go back to school. I don't know if I'm going to do it. And I decided, like, okay, I feel like I'm supposed to do this. Like, I need to go back to school. And I was so afraid that I didn't tell anyone. I only told like a couple of people. I was so afraid that people were going to talk me out of my decision because back then I was very like just some decisions I would make, if a certain person said it, I would just fold and just like completely do whatever they think is better. And so I just knew, I was like, I have to be very confident in this decision. I can't have anyone like talk me out of this. I can't tell anyone. So I had to have like tunnel vision. I was so afraid to take the GRE because you have to do math. And I was like, I do not want to take the GRE. I did not want to take the GRE. Well, I was like, I'm going back to school. So I'm going to take the GRE. I'm going to pass. I'm going to do it. I only got one shot. I didn't want to pay for it twice. So I was like, I got one shot. You got to do it. But I say all that to say that I was scared out of my mind, but I was so shocked at how much I was able to accomplish. The reason why I was so afraid about going back to school because I had the wrong mindset about myself. I saw myself as a failure. I saw myself as never good at school. And I always compared myself in school to other students because I always had the philosophy C's get degrees, right? But technically, over time, C's do get degrees, but it's also good to take value in your work and be intentional in school. And so by the time I got to grad school, like I really wanted to like actually like redeem myself and do a really good job. And it just really showed me that like in my weakness, like God's strength is more than enough. And so with that being said, I was able to go back to school. I was able to graduate and complete, the 2-year process and just really conquer the fear of just like not being good enough. And it was really hard at first because I went to a field where no one had the same major as me or same background. And so I was definitely very new to the field, but it was such a great experience. And like one of the things that I actually prayed for, because I hated school, that was another thing. That was another reason why I didn't want to go back to school. I hated school with a passion. And I asked God, I said, God, please, you're going to have to help me learn, like love learning, because there's no way I can go back to school. Like, how in the world am I going to go back to school if I hate school? So I was just like, I got to do something. So I think just changing my mindset from realizing like, hey, you're not a failure. Hey, like you're not stupid. Like you can do this. Like you can do this. And even if you feel weak, like in your weakness, Christ is strong for you. And like, you don't have to feel 100% perfect. You don't have to feel like 100% enough, but just keep showing up. And so I actually met one of my best friends through the program, and it was a great experience. And we would just like struggle together and study together all the time. And it was really good to have someone to just like, walk through that journey of the unknown, because both of us we took a chance to do this program. Everyone else, they kind of knew their whole life, like, oh yeah, I'll go this field. And her and I, we took a chance, and that's how we bonded, because we were like, I mean, we know why we're here, but we're still trying to figure it out. And so I was learning as I was going, and I took a chance in getting this degree when I wasn't really even sure what kind of job I wanted, or I barely even knew about the program when I applied for it. Like I kind of heard about it, and then I was like, wow, this sounds like something I'd be interested in. And it ended up being like all that and more. So it's okay to take a chance. It's okay to like, even if you're feeling insecure, you have to fight through that, because like you can do it. Like to this day, I'm like, what? How did I do that? Like for me, I felt like that was a miracle for me, because growing up, I wasn't like the 100% smartest student. And now I have 2, degrees. And so I'm like, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Like, and I don't think a lot of people knew that people probably thought I was smarter than I actually was. But, well, I was smart, but I just like made it through. Like half of elementary school, I couldn't see. So that hindered some of my education. And then, so I think that kind of set a foundations of mediocrity. So I didn't really care. I was just like, I want to do really good, but like, if I don't, like, it's not the end of the world. Right. And so just being able to challenge myself and take it the next step. And I got to study abroad in this program too. And it was pretty cool, because I was like the only grad student studying abroad in this program. But I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to study abroad, because I just love to study abroad. So I was like, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And I was able to do it with my degree and everything, and still graduate. It was hard because I was full time. I was working full time the entire time while getting my second degree, just so you know. So it was not easy by all means, but it was definitely possible. And so I just want to say that was a fear that I had to confront. And I learned so much about myself. Like every day I'm like, what? I can't believe, like, I used to have weeks where I would look at my syllabus and look at my calendar, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to make it through this week. There's no way I'm going to make it through this month. And I used to just tell myself, if you can just make it to May, you'll be okay. Just make it to May. If you can just make it to May. And then May would come, and I'm like, okay, summer classes, if you can make it to August, but you'd be surprised how much you can overcome if you just take a chance and just go for it, even if you don't feel good enough to do it. And so that's kind of one of the fears that I was able to confront, the fear of feeling inadequate when it comes to school. So, yeah. I love sharing that story, because I'm still like, what? How in the world did this happen? Because me, never.
That's huge. And that's also the consistency of showing up for yourself. You showed up for yourself throughout that entire thing. You made a promise to yourself and you kept it. And that's hard. It's hard when you wake up in the morning and you're like, I got 4 hours of sleep last night. This, that, and the other thing happened. But you stuck to that, and that's incredible.
Yes. And I could not do it alone. I think having that study partner, having God and my faith in Him, but having that person to just be there with me, that really held me accountable. Like we didn't study everything together, but her, myself, and my friend, he's from Korea. We would all like study together at Starbucks. And now I'm thinking about this weird cheese experience with Starbucks, but they had some weird cheese. It did not taste good, and it's a memory that will last a lifetime. But like that kind of thing, like accountability helps you too when it comes to reaching goals and conquering your fears. Like when I studied abroad the very first time, someone said, "Hey, are you gonna let fear keep you from doing this, or are you gonna do it?" And I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna do it." You know, sometimes you just need that person to like give you that push to take the next step. So who you're surrounded by really helps you when it comes to confrontation as well, and confronting fears, and even confronting unhealthy habits like me avoiding people for 6 months. That's not a good habit. And I'm glad I'm breaking that. So, but I would have never tried to break it if someone never confronted me about it. So, yeah.
Mm,
Fun.
yeah, I love that you brought this story up because I think it just goes to show that your your yes to like going back to school, it led you to many amazing things, kind of like, with DeAnna with, career or job position choice, it led her to many great things. And I feel like with your situation, even though there were those obstacles of, whether you not believing in yourself or, worried about maybe other people were gonna say, oh, are you really going to do this? Or, or even just the idea of school in general was just like the worst thought possible. I think that you just giving yourself that, you know, basically you giving yourself that determination to go after this, and it led you to a new friendship, and it led you to like going abroad, like studying abroad, and it led you to getting your second degree. Like I think that there's so many amazing things that came out of that situation. Probably not the Starbucks situation, but everything else around, like everything else around, like it was
No, we
amazing.
learned not to eat that cheese at Starbucks. Not all cheese is bad at Starbucks, but that cheese, um, it just didn't taste delicious. It was,
You
yeah,
learn that's what this is about. You learn from your
yeah.
experiences.
But you gotta take a chance. You gotta just trust that there's more inside of you than you can see.
Mm,
And even if you don't see it, God sees it. And if I feel like if I didn't feel like I was called to do that program, I would have never done it. And I would have missed out on a great opportunity. I would have missed out. What if I let fear just stop me from doing it? I wouldn't have my best friend. I wouldn't have been in her
mhm,
wedding last year. I don't know. And I have childhood best friends, but I would have never met my friend. I would have never met her. And she loves to travel. She's like into politics, and like so we bonded over like travel, international politics, all these different things. But well, she's more international politics than I was. I was just more international. But we did bond over our love for travel and all these different things. So like I would have never met her if I just didn't like be obedient to what I felt like God was calling me to do. And it's really just God. It's not me. It was just me like taking the steps, but I feel like I could not have done it without God. Like literally, it's a miracle. It's a miracle. Like for me to go back to school, that was a miracle. Yeah, it was a
mm,
miracle. Yeah, so kind of like how you were like when you were in high school, like everyone thought you were so quiet. For me, I just felt like I was definitely not like the smartest kid. I hung out with the smart kids. Like in high school, I figured it out. You hang out with smart kids, you make better grades, and I did because
There you go.
my freshman year of high school, I went to summer school.
mm.
It's really just I didn't do any homework. I didn't know you really had to do homework. I don't know what I was thinking. And I was like super private, so my mom like didn't know. I was just like, oh, everything's fine. So she didn't know, but until summer school. But after then, I was like, okay, I got to figure something out. So I just started hanging out with smarter people, and I realized like you make better choices, with who you're hanging out with. But still, to this day, to like, fail a class in high school to like get a couple of degrees is kind of crazy to me. So yeah.
Incredible. And you are who you surround yourself with. Like your level of thinking will completely alter depending on who you're hanging out with. Like even your acceptance for what's tolerable and this, that, and the other thing. It's just crazy. So it's funny enough. Somebody used to say, like an old mentor of mine was, tell me your friends and I'll tell you what you look like in 5 years. Like, tell me who you know, who you surround yourself with, your inner circle. And it's so true, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's whoever you surround yourself with, because you're put in that environment constantly and you're so used to whatever the norm is for that environment that you build yourself to be like, for that to be your norm. And that's not, that's obviously not to say you should be cutting all these people out of your life, but again, it goes back to yourself, what your goals are, your mental health, your boundaries, this, that, and the other thing. But so happy for you. And it seems like you're happy with what you do too. And I love all the tidbits, the amount you read, and the recommendations and lessons you give. Because I'm like, oh, I love that. I'm going to steal that for myself. I'm going to use that.
Thank you. It's been one of my goals to read more ever since COVID, I think.
Okay.
Because after graduating from my master's program, I was like, okay, maybe I don't hate reading.
I love it.
I was like, maybe I only hated boring reading. So I started reading like fiction, and I came across this book called Boundaries, and everyone kept saying, you got to read it. And I read it, and I was like, this is me. I have no boundaries. And so Boundaries, that book by Henry Cloud and Emily Friedman, those two resources have really helped me when it comes to like decision making and prioritization and really just breaking bad habits from people pleasing. I'm recovering and not looking back.
I love it.
Yes, I do love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing with that, because I think that was amazing to hear, from your perspective as well, of like something that you were afraid to confront, and it brought many great things for you. So I'm glad to see great, like an amazing outcome that came out of that, and that you had a great support system behind you. I think like the whole idea of like the fear of the unknown is like a big thing, for sure that you brought up, DeAnna. I think that's a really good example. You just start to wonder, what is life going to look like for you, and certain like X amount of years, what is going to happen to me in 5 years, like what choices am I making now that's going to affect me in 5 years. And you start just thinking long term with so many things. And that even kind of leads me to earlier on the podcast, I mentioned that I was going to bring something up here at the end, and I already kind of brought it up to Brittany and DeAnna, but like something that I had to confront myself with is this whole like podcast experience. So, I've definitely have enjoyed this podcast experience. This is episode 105. I've done 105 amazing episodes. I've had like over 40 different people on this podcast. And, I think that, I've had many people come back. Brittany and DeAnna are two really good guests that have come back, and that I've gotten to know even more, and like, growing in my friendship with both of them. But I have gotten to a point of like almost a fear of the unknown with this podcast, because I was mentioning to them before we started the episode that I've kind of gotten to a burnout stage. I almost kind of feel like it's almost like it's becoming like I have other things going on in my life. I've had like big things happen. Like this month is colon cancer awareness month, and my mom went through that a few years back. She's currently in remission, so that's great. But I had an event for her last weekend, and I was planning. I was planning ever since like September. So September all the way to last weekend, I was just constant, like, trying to find a venue, and like the DJ, the catering, the people, decorations, just I could go on and on, but it just seemed like you have to know all the ins and outs of the whole event, and I just feel like so much of that, it was rewarding, it was really fun, and I was honored to do it, but at the same time, it can be very challenging, because like you almost sometimes will stretch yourself too thin, because I have that on top of my work, and then on top of that, I want to maintain my relationships with everyone that's in my life, all my family members. I want to have that balance of making sure I spend time with my family, friends, and even me, like with my faith. I want to make sure that I'm walking with God, like stuff like that. I want to make sure that everything in my life, as far as health, like my spiritual health, financial health, all of that is in the right place. And I feel like with this podcast, I feel like it has been an amazing experience. And I won't say I'm never doing an episode again, but I will say that I am taking a break for the moment. I won't say that this is never happening again. I'm never doing an episode again, but and it may be the case. I may be going in a whole different direction. But I just wanted to at least bring up the reason why I'm talking about this is because I almost have like a fear, like I think, sometimes you can be your own worst enemy. And before I even brought this up to Brittany and DeAnna, I guess I started having all of these thoughts in my head, like, did you, like, you failed yourself in a way, like you said you were going to do something, and you've done it for quite some time, but then you're almost like giving up. And I don't want to think that way. I don't want to like put those doubts in my head that like I'm giving up and that I'm failing myself. But I did have that small glimpse of a moment where I feel like I was failing myself. And I guess I just had to also think about this burnout stage. I don't want to keep doing something and have like no energy, no excitement, and all of that with each podcast episode. Even though like this episode really was an amazing episode, which is why I don't want to say that I want to completely quit it. But if I'm going to be honest, my last episode that I did before this one, I was listening to myself because I do the editing and all that with it, and I could just hear in my voice that I don't sound the same. Like from when I started this podcast, I sound different. I almost sound like it's becoming more of a job than a passion. And I don't want it to be that way because I do have a passion of like just talking with people, and I love talking with different people and getting to know people. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not giving myself enough time to just spend time with myself and grow and all of that. I'm just putting my hand in this area, this here, 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 and I'm stretching myself a little too thin. So just for the time being, I do want to say that I'm just taking a small break. I hope a small break. It may be a longer break. It could be a year from now, for all I know, but I just want to take a step back and just kind of really think about everything, pray about, where's this going to go? Am I going to come up with new topics? Do I want to focus on something that I'm super passionate about and just add on to that, just talk about one set thing. I know some people's podcasts is only talk about sports. They're passionate about sports. Some people only talk about reality TV. Some people talk about geography, history, all of that. And mine's a little bit of a lot. Mine's a little bit of everything. So, I wonder, could I make it more specific? So that's kind of why I want to just take a break, just really think about where I want to go with this because I don't want to say that Not Your Average Joel is over because I don't want it to end. And I don't want it to be over. I love getting to know everyone, but just for me not to go crazy because I feel like just things are so chaotic right now, like with just so much going on in life. I just don't want to have this add on to more of what's going on currently. So just taking a small step back and just the fear of the unknown does come in my head, and it probably will even after I stop this episode and stop recording, just the fear of the unknown. But I'm just gonna, try to be as positive as possible, let it everything fall in place the way it should, and hopefully before you know it, I'll be back. But I just think that confrontation was a perfect topic to, and then kind of bringing this up because I'm almost having to confront myself that like, look, Joe, you need to stop for just a moment. You need to take a beat. You just need to take a breath. Like you feel like you only have time to just work, leave as soon as you get off work, do whatever, come back and go to sleep. And it's like you don't have much time to do anything else. So yeah, that's kind of where my head's at. And, I definitely, don't want people to, I'm almost like a people pleaser in a way too. Like I don't want people to be disappointed that, like, oh my gosh, you said you were gonna give up at one point and now it sounds like you are giving up. And I don't want people to think that I'm fully giving up on it, because I'm definitely not. So anyway, I just thought I had to share a little bit of that, definitely before I forget and before I end this episode.
And
So
Joel, I want to say you did a magnificent job on this journey. Like it was incredible to watch you. Even this episode, like you took something that was such a difficult thing to relate to your audience. You confronted it, you explained the situation, like you took the power back. And I think a lot of people forget that so many times everybody, I don't want to say everybody fails in life, but these are learning opportunities, like for you to pivot and to find your true passion. Like when you fall out of passion for something, or when you fall out of something that used to make you happy, it's okay to admit that it doesn't make you happy anymore. And you're not stuck in this one career path, or you're not stuck in this one place in life. Like growth happens in the places that you're most uncomfortable, and by you challenging yourself. And I applaud you for being able to admit that so openly, for being able to change and adapt and be flexible, and for being excited for the new things that life is going to bring.
Yeah.
yeah.
Being open to pivot. Emily P. Freeman, she's like my favorite podcaster. She says, you are free to change your mind.
Love that.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. Because we want to be people of integrity. We want to keep our word. Sometimes things change.
Yeah, very true.
And
Yeah, I definitely appreciate, both of y'all, with your kind words and even that nice, quote as well, because it is, okay to change and like to pivot and, to go in a different direction. Maybe my podcast will turn into a travel blog for all I know, like a travel vlog. It could possibly turn into something like that, because that's something that I'm passionate about. It could turn into, just what will be done with, this, and I may go into a whole new passion. But I definitely have been blessed with this opportunity, because I've always thought there who would have ever thought? I know y'all, neither of y'all knew me back when I was younger in high school, but I grew up like a super introvert. Like I didn't have any friends until like my high school years. Like elementary, middle school, I didn't really have any friends because I was so quiet and so shy. And not I always, thinking about from other people's perspectives that knew me when I was younger, they probably were thinking, like, of all people to have a podcast, Joel Vance, who got voted for Who's Who for the quietest person, has got a podcast. Like, if he can do it, then like anything is possible. And I guess that's kind of what I want to come out with this, that like anything is possible. And if you believe in yourself, you can do it. And I even just to make it to triple digits, to this many episodes, I feel like it's worth definitely being proud of, because I know it takes a lot of dedication, it takes a lot of scheduling and editing. And I don't want to sound like I'm like, but sometimes I feel like I gotta give myself more credit than I should, because sometimes, like I said, I could be my own worst enemy, and I don't pat myself on the back enough. And I think with this being potentially the last episode, I just want to tell myself that, that like you did this, like you had this in your mind. After the Ireland trip, actually, it's when this like idea came to mind, that like, wow, like Joel, so many different people from all over the country, so many people, that are, have that you have interesting conversations with. And why not just make a podcast? Let's talk about different topics, break barriers, talk about the elephant in the room. And I feel like I tried my best with, all of this and, definitely, what both of y'all have said, off and on this recording has been very encouraging and supportive. And, I definitely appreciate y'all along with everyone that has been on my channel, everyone that has watched, everyone that's shared my videos, has liked my videos, and I don't think people realize how much this has impacted me in a positive way because I feel like I've come out even more of an like someone that is so talkative to how to learn how to take criticism, at times, with maybe I'm talking too much, I'm long-winded, and sometimes I have to, simmer it down, take it down a notch, and I just think that I learned so much not only about other people and their lives and about their perspectives, but I just learned so much about myself as well. So, yeah, just again, thank y'all both for being so encouraging and supportive.
Absolutely. 105 is such an achievement. And I have to commend your interviewing skills because you always asked really great questions. And that was probably one of my favorite parts about being a part of this journey. And we get to see
Yeah.
what's next.
Yeah.
And we're excited for it, Joel. It's been
Yeah.
incredible. Thank you so much for having us. It's not lost on, I hope it's not lost on everyone how much time and effort you put into this, you put into sharing each person's journey, experience. Like every podcast I was a part of, even the snippets I'd get to hear, like when I was listening to your other ones, it's just so incredible how many different people and different perspectives and how much it can open up you as a person when you're actually listening um, to different ways that people think and people analyze and people handle situations or topics at hand. So it's been a real incredible ride with you. I'm excited to see where life takes you no matter what, and I'm so happy that you put yourself in the different positions and opportunities for us to be able to meet in Ireland, and then it brought us to how many episodes later here that we still get to connect as friends all the time, which is incredible.
Mm. Yes,
Yes.
yes, I definitely appreciate both of y'all for saying those kind words. I'm definitely excited to see where things go, and hopefully, and whether it's a podcast, whether it's a travel vlog, whatever the case may be, I know I'll have a good support system behind me. So, I'm definitely glad to have both of y'all here for my potential final episode. So, thank y'all both for being here.
Of course.
It's an
Thank you for
honor.
having us. Yeah.
And DeAnna, you just have such a gentle way of restoring people through your encouragement. It is
Oh,
beautiful. You're really good at encouraging people, and I just appreciate your intentionality all throughout this conversation from before we started the podcast to the end. It's just been so restorative, and I've just been enjoying hearing your vernacular, the way you speak, the way you care, the way you communicate. It's been beautiful. So thank you for sharing.
You are too kind. Thank you so much. I take that to heart, and thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. And see, Joel, I'm not going to lie, this is what I'm going to miss is being able to connect with new people like this and being able to make new friends. But we'll definitely have to keep in touch, Brittany, because
Yes, I would love to
absolutely
do
love
that.
hanging out tonight, all three of us.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, that's what I love about these podcasts is it's like for different people that come on and that don't know each other and they end up meeting and then they end up becoming good friends. And I feel like that's happened with a few people that I've, been able to help like build a connection. Maybe they have similarities and different things. And I think that's the beauty of like this podcasting world. So I definitely that's why, I don't want to fully say I'm giving up on it because I think there's a lot of great things that come out of it. So yeah, definitely. I'm glad that, y'all it was just meant to be for all three of us to do this together.
I love it.
Yeah.
You're pivoting to your new passion. That's what you're doing.
Ooh, I love that. Pivot to
Yeah.
passion.
Cool.
Mhm.
I do like that. I'm going to keep that in mind. Pivot to the new passion.
Yep. And 105 is a big accomplishment.
Huge.
Mhm.
And I know
So,
you've probably helped more than 105 people with these podcasts, with the people who are listening to them and really, really thinking about different situations and how they can help themselves.
hmm.
Yeah.
That was really kind of you to say. I definitely appreciate that. I hope I did make an impact, make an impact on people for sure. I think that, that's the goal of this, hopefully, helps people learn about different topics and all of that. I think that, that's the goal. And, I hope that with y'all's help, I think that, that we've accomplished that goal in many ways with many topics. Yeah, so I think that this was a perfect conversation, with the topic and everything, and just, talking about confrontation and just this is just stuff that I'll continue to take with me into the future and to, grow with this. So I think that this is a great one, viewers. I hope that y'all enjoyed this episode as well. I hope whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on any of the podcast streaming platforms that you got something out of this. The goal is that at least one person is impacted by this, then I think that I did the job. I got the job done. And, I think that, just as we're closing, I just want to, like I said, thank everybody again for, the support that y'all have given. And, I'm not going to say goodbye. I'm not even going to say see you later because I'm just going to say that, I hope to see everybody again, and whether it's on here on the podcast or if not, then, you can see me on my social medias. You can, I still will have my podcast page. I still have a personal page as well. So, if you want to catch up with me on social media, you can reach out to me on the Instagram podcast page, and, I can give you my socials. So, definitely I'll keep y'all updated on that. So, once again, everybody, thank you for watching. I hope that everybody has a great rest of your day or night, depending on when you're watching or listening to this. And I guess I will see y'all later. Thank you again, and I'll talk to y'all later.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to another episode of Not Your Average Joe. My podcast is available not only on YouTube, but also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, and Pocket Cast. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page where you can reach out to me. On Facebook, just type in Not Your Average Joel, and you should be able to find my Facebook page. You can find me on Instagram at Not Your Average Joel Podcast. I also now have a website where you can find all of my resources there, along with learning more about who I am and what my podcast is about. You can go to www.notyouraveragejoelpodcast.com. I've been in the world of podcasting for 5 seasons now, and I will never take this opportunity for granted. Thank y'all so much for your support, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Not Your Average Joel. Goodbye.